So welcome to the third person character. In this video we will be adding a third person character to our scene. There he is, standing on the ground, breathing away. And the other thing we will be doing is adding this green nav mesh and making sure that it's nice and smooth up the stairs. So I will see you in there. So in the last video I said I would tag my commit. I'll just show you what that is. Here's the commit for the last video. If you click on tag here, you can either tag the branch basically or a specific commit. I'm going to go ahead and tag this specific commit, and I'm just going to tag it with version 4.13, if I can type, 0.0 like that. And then, or just 4.13.0, there you go. And what that does is it just puts that tag on, and as the master label heads up the tree, this 4.13.0 will stay there, and it's just a really quick and easy way for me to see in which video I upgraded my version. Not a bad thing to do to keep track of where you upgraded your versions. Okay, so let's go back over to Unreal and let's just take a look at what we need to do next. What, of course, we're going to need to make this even remotely interesting, just move that out, is a third-person character in here that's going to be running around and is going to act as a guard, and we're going to be focusing on creating patrol routes for those guards. So where do we get a third-person character from? Well, there's no point in us building these up from the ground. What I would rather do with the first person and the third person is to use what Unreal already give us, like this first-person character here, and then start breaking it down as we need to. Because frankly, it already works. It would be weeks of work to produce this thing from scratch, and we will learn what all these parameters mean. Now, in the previous video, I talked about parameters, and in one of the quiz questions coming up, there's going to be a question about how to change the character movement speed. So just be aware it's under character movement, and then you've got in here, you've got the idea of maximum walking speed when you're crouched and standing and things like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get a third person in. How do you do that? Well, what we come to is the content browser, add new, and then add feature or content pack. Then let's click over to C++ feature, and we can actually bring in the necessary stuff from the third person demo project. So you'll see it's a slightly different world. We started off with the first person as our template because we are fundamentally making a third person game, but we can bring in the assets from the third person project too. So that's add new, C++, and then third person. Let's go ahead and do that. And it's going to add a whole load of stuff to our project. You can watch what's happening in version control by hitting F5, letting it refresh, and you'll see that it's adding quite a lot of stuff in here. It's making changes to the engine ini, telling it that it's got these things included, and then it's adding a lot of stuff, meshes, textures, materials, and animations, which we'll be talking about plenty later in the section. So, added source file. Would I like to edit the code now? No, I don't need to edit the code right now. And here we go. If we look more carefully at the content browser now, you'll see that we've got quite a few directories. We've got first person CPP, mannequin, third person CPP. Now, don't just go moving stuff around yet and reorganizing this, because it can actually break it due to references. We will move things around and tidy up this hierarchy as we need to, but for now, let's just allow ourselves to have this slightly messy content hierarchy. And later on, I will talk about things called redirectors, which you can actually show here in the filters menu. We need to be showing the redirectors before we start moving things around, and we'll get to that when we need to. But if you do feel the absolute urge to move things around, then turn show redirectors on now, and you'll see that there are some complications with moving files around. It doesn't just move them. As I say, we'll get to that when we need to get to that. For now, let's go into third-person CPP, blueprints, and third-person character. Let's just drop one in the scene, and it will snap to the floor. There he is. So, I'm going to play the game, go find him and have a look at him. Where is he? What's he doing? Well, he's just kind of standing there doing something a bit strange. So, what is this third-person character, and what on earth is he doing in our game? Well, let's firstly go and have a look at him. There he is. There's the instance of the third-person character sitting here on our map. If we edit the third-person character and go to the full blueprint editor, we'll get a very similar thing to the first-person character. In fact, if I flick between them for a moment, you can see that they're very, very similar, but there are some differences. So here is the third-person character, and he has a skeletal mesh, one of these meshes that can actually move and deform, and he has a default kind of breathing idle animation that he has here. The camera with a third person is behind him. We don't actually need that camera. There's no harm in leaving the camera there for the moment. The game, if you play it, will be automatically using that first person camera. There is actually a camera sitting behind the third person character, but it's just not being used right now. Okay, so back to the third person character. Let's have a look at what's going on with this guy. Firstly, how do we choose what default animation he has? So he's standing on the ground quite comfortably here in the blueprint editor and just breathing away. But if we look inside the actual game, he's doing some weird stuff. So the most likely his is just that he is impacting with the ground, i.e. his capsule collider here, or his feet are going through the ground. So the simple solution to that is to lift him up a little bit, and then have a look at him and see if he's any better. Hasn't helped. Let's lift him up further. And if it still doesn't help, then we will go further and look at his default animation state. So let's lift him plenty off the ground. No, he's doing something very strange. So let's click on the third person character and start exploring a little bit about what he can do. So if you click into him and then search, because there's a lot of properties on this guy, if we search for animation, then you'll see it brings up just some of the components and their details. So it's saying use an animation blueprint. Well, for the moment, let's just, rather than using a blueprint to control his animation, let's just use an animation asset right now, and then specifically pick an idle animation, third person idle there. So what I've done is I've said the animation mode is a specific asset, and then I've picked the third person idle animation. Let's take a look. There he is, standing there much more sensibly and breathing. I'll just pop him on the ground with the end key now. And that little sequence just gives you an idea of how you might want to debug these things. I mean, I knew that it was the animation there, but I just wanted to point out that those sorts of strange behaviors could also be, especially with ragdoll-based characters, to do with collisions. So it's always worth checking things aren't passing through the ground first, especially when you've just dumped them in the scene and not checked their position. Anyway, there he is. He's in the scene and he's got a third-person idle animation on him, and he's standing there quite happily. So that's the third-person character. He will be ready now to start moving around the scene. What I want you to do now is to simply add a nav mesh. Of course, before we can get this thing moving around, we're going to need a nav mesh in our level. You've done it before in Battletank. Ensure it covers up the stairs, so you need the three-dimensionality, the height to cover the area up the stairs as well. Preview it with a P key, and then share a still of what you've got over on the community site at community.gamedev.tv. So go ahead, pause the video, and just add yourself a nav mesh now. Welcome back. So this is a pretty simple challenge. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show nav mesh, which is the show navigation, which I can use the show menu, or I can just hit the P key. You'll see there is no navigation right now. So I'll make myself a little more room, grab the modes brush, I'm going to say volumes here, and then under volumes somewhere we should have nav mesh bounds volume. There it is. I'm going to pop it in. Now I find when positioning these nav meshes, it's quite useful to use this four-way view here, because that gives me an overview of the whole level in one go. So I can see the side, I can see the front, etc. all in one go. So now we need to select the nav mesh. One way to do that is here. Go to details, clearing my search. And now it's just a question of changing the size of this nav mesh so that it's appropriate. So we centralize it in the level by resetting its transform. We can then pull up the X size until it covers the level. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit larger than the level, that's fine, and we can just reposition like that. I would overspill just a little bit. Then I can work on the Y size. Again, same thing applies. Cover the level, that's fine. And now the Z size. I said I wanted it to cover these boxes, etc. So let's just increase the Z size, repositioning it as we do, to something like that. Okay. Great, so using this multi-view is handy for that. Now let's have a look down here. You see, we have green on the top of all of these surfaces, and we have a continuous, or at least fairly continuous, nav mesh moving up here. I think that'll be okay. It looks a little broken on the stairs there. If you want to improve that, what we could do is just turn the step height down a little bit, and then increase the number of steps, maybe just by 1, and that should be enough to get a continuous volume. So I'm going to go with a 26 or 28 step height maybe. And you can see here that the nav mesh is now much more continuous going up the side there. So great, take a screenshot of your area, perhaps focusing on the stairs here. If you want to select all the faces of these and apply a default material, you can. I'm not going to bother right now. And I will see you in the next video.